Which powertrain is the best to get in the Jeep Wrangler? We'll find out in today's video. I'll include a link to the Jeep here in Sandy's website in the description down below. Also include a link to my car buying guide. Let's get into it. There are two base powertrains in the Wrangler, the 2.0 turbo and the 3.6 V6. The 2.0 turbo puts out 270 horsepower and then 295 pound-feet of torque, whereas the V6 puts out 285 horsepower and then 260 pound-feet of torque. Both of them go through an 8-speed. Out of those two, I picked the V6, which is in this Wrangler, to be the winner. It's been around a lot longer. It's not a perfect powertrain, but it's been shown to be reliable. It's smooth. It's just the powertrain that a lot of people think about when they think about the Wrangler nowadays. Now there are two premium powertrains for the Wrangler. There's the 4xe, which is a turbo 2-liter 4-cylinder hybrid. It puts out 375 horsepower and then 470 pound-feet of torque. And then there's the 392 V8, which this Wrangler has. 6.4 Hemi V8 goes through an 8-speed. It puts out 470 horsepower and then 470 pound-feet of torque. And I think it goes without saying the V8 is not only a lot cooler, but the 4xe probably would have lit on fire halfway through the comparison. So that's why I went with the V8. Now I'm trying to hit 500,000 subscribers before the end of the year. I would really appreciate it if you guys would help out with that. Now, I picked out these two Rubicons because, like I said, they have the winners of each of their respective categories within the Wrangler lineup of powertrain, and they're both extreme recons. So both of these have the upgraded steel bumper with the winch from the factory. They also both have 35-inch tall tires, and you can probably tell they're both finished in Mojito. And they actually both have the same style of rock sliders, which are kind of new for the Wrangler. Not rock sliders themselves, but this flat type that they have now. Now, both this Rubicon and that one are re-geared. The V6 has a 4.88 axle ratio, whereas the V8 has a 4.56, so the V6 actually is geared a little bit lower. Now, I do think vehicle weight's very important. The V6 weighs about 5,400 pounds. It also has a part-time four-wheel drive system, and this interior is fully loaded. This has all the gadgets, gizmos, luxury, and everything. Whereas the 392 only weighs 150 pounds more than the V6, so it's about 5,550. And then it has a full-time four-wheel drive system, and as standard, the 392 comes with a fully loaded interior. If you give the V6 all of the same equipment as the 392 has standard, it stickers for $76,000. The 392 stickers for $102,000 for this final edition. That's roughly a $26,000 price gap between the two vehicles, and again, the biggest difference is that powertrain. So let's take them out and see how they perform. I think it'll be very interesting to see the V6 with the 4.88 compared to the V8 with the 4.56. Starting off in the V6, and some of you might wonder why I didn't use my new 392 for this comparison. Well, first off, I didn't drive it off. Secondly, I thought it would be cool to have Mojito next to each other. And by the way, if this isn't your color, they've got a, let's see, a red one. Yep. They've got a red one with the same package as this, the Firecracker red. That one seems to be a little bit more popular with people because it's not quite as crazy. I love this color though, I'll tell you. I was really tempted because that satin PPF that I put on vehicles looks really good on something like this. Now, the 4.88 gears means that this can move 35s. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, you know, the 2.0 turbo with that low end torque is going to feel a little bit better. And I agree, the 2.0 turbos, it's nice. I've driven 2.0 turbos with even 37s, and man, that engine can move them quite well, especially here at higher elevation. That being said, there is one big deficit, two deficits with the 2.0 turbo, right? Any turbocharged engine tends to have a little bit of a shorter lifespan. Now, I've talked to a lot of people that have 2.0 turbos, and they've actually been quite reliable, pretty much as reliable as the 3.6 V6. Still something to consider. The other big thing is fuel economy. Like the V6, you're going to have a fuel economy loss with these bigger tires and re-gearing. The 2.0 turbo seems to take a bigger hit. I've had people tell me, and you can correct me if you've had a different experience, but I've had people tell me with 35s and 37s and the 2.0 turbos, people are getting like 12 miles per gallon. Whereas in the 3.6 V6s, some people are getting that low if they drive it like a race car driver, but a lot of people have told me that they're getting, you know, closer to about, you know, 14 to 16 miles per gallon, which is still not fantastic. Some have even gotten a little bit higher, but, you know, you're moving 35s. The transmission is, I think, one of the highlights of this setup. It's so smooth, and I think people forget, like, unless you're a current JK owner, right? People forget how big of a difference it was to go from a JK to a JL, because the JK had the old 5-speed, and it's like just going to the 8-speed that the JL has. It's like it transformed the Wrangler. For me personally, you know, my family has had Jeeps for a long time. I'd consider myself kind of a Jeep person to an extent, but when I drove all the Jeeps when I first started working in the dealership, I was like, yeah, you know, the Wrangler's kind of cool, but this thing drives like crap. Like the steering's, it's a Wrangler, right? Steering's bad, suspension's bad, it's slow, the transmission's lackluster. I'm like, I have no clue why anyone drives these. And then the JL came out and I was like, I can get behind this, 100%. Like, this is so much smoother. It's got so much more power. No, not an actual horsepower, but it feels like it. So it was, I think we kind of forget how big of a change that really did make for the Wrangler. And this new 24 Plus iteration of the Wrangler is a lot more daily drivable. There's way more insulation. This one even has the top insulation. And so it just leads to a very, I wouldn't say like luxe experience, but like for a Wrangler, it's pretty luxe. It's actually daily drivable, even on the highway. It's not the quietest, right? You still get the wind noise, you still get the tire noise. It's still a Jeep at the end of the day, but it is significantly better compared to what it used to be. Man, these 4.88 gears, I've noticed that the Jeep dealers are now ordering like all the Wranglers with this, which I approve 100%. Not all of them, but many of them. It really does help out with that low end. Again, the biggest downside is highway, but if you're not going to do a lot of highway driving, who cares? Right? I think that around town there's no real deficit because you've got 8 gears to go through. So it's really just the highway where there's a bit of a deficit because you're going to be at higher RPMs compared to having the other axle ratio. So 392, 4.56. Let's go see how that compares. Again, it's not as, like everyone says, it's a $30,000 price difference. Again, if you spec them option for option the same, you've got to do a Rubicon X. You've got to add the heavy-duty rock sliders. You've got to add the Extreme Recon. Once you add everything, it's still a big price difference, still 26 grand roughly, but it's not as big of a price difference between the two. And if you take into account, you know, markups on the vehicles, because dealerships usually willing to wheel and deal, I think there's a little bit more. There's not a ton more, but I think there's a little bit more markup in the 392, so you might be able to get a slightly bigger discount on 392 than a 3.6 V6. So that makes the price gap even smaller. Still big, still a lot of money for a powertrain. But let's go see. That was a little bit concerning with the startup. I think this Jeep's been sitting for a hot minute, so. Anyways, 392. Of course we all know it sounds better. I mean, just listen to this thing. Let's roll the window down a little bit. That's a stock exhaust too. You got the deep V8 rumble. It's epic. It's epic. We all know. Now, the 392 is the only Wrangler that's full-time four-wheel drive. You've got a part-time system on all the other Wranglers. And it does make the steering feel significantly different, right? You're gonna have more vagueness. It's gonna feel a little bit heavier. It's just what happens when you do full-time four-wheel drive versus a part-time system. The ride quality on the 392 is actually slightly worse than a Pentastar V6. What I've discovered is with the 392, they've got pretty firm shocks on this and soft springs, so it kind of wallows a little bit, and then it's firm over the bumps. That's one reason why I'm changing out the suspension to my 392 that I just bought, because the stock setup is just not very nice. It doesn't drive well. Now, the torque difference is monumental. Even though that car had a 4.88 axle ratio versus the 4.56 here, 470 pound-feet of torque from a naturally aspirated V8. So you've got just so much more torque with this. It's a completely different world. Like the other one, you know, you get into it and you're like, okay, this has power. This one, you barely get into it and you're like, this has some power. And it just moves. Those 35s are no problem whatsoever for this. So the other one, you're gonna be going full throttle quite often, whereas this, you're gonna be partial throttle most of the time. Look at this. Again, partial throttle. It just has significantly more power. That 4.88 though does really well. Again, around town, the 4.88 won't feel bad. It's just on the highway that'll feel like a deficit. And something else, when you're rock crawling, I hear this all the time, especially from like, I've seen TFL say this all the time, you don't need that much horsepower off-road. You don't need it, but it's nice. When you have something like this, you have this in four-wheel drive low with the diffs locked, and you're crawling over something, you just idle up, and it's just perfect traction. You gotta 2-foot it in the V6. It's not bad. It's not like the end of the world. It's like 2-footing. Oh man, this you can literally no-foot it up a lot of obstacles because of the torque. It's cool. So there's just an extra layer of smooth crawling that you don't get in the other Wrangler powertrains. Even the 4xe is the worst because the hybrid system is just horrible. So in conclusion, like I said, with the two categories, the base and the premium, the 3.6 V6 I think is still the best base powertrain, and then this is still the best premium powertrain that you can get in the Wrangler. It just has so much power. Man, this person's kind of blocking me. This has so much power, so much torque. It's smooth. I'm not going to say that it's worth the extra $26,000, but what I will say is if you can afford it, you're not going to regret it. It's one of those things where, like, yeah, if you have to really stretch to make it work, it's probably not worth it, right? The V6 can do quite a bit, but like if you can comfortably afford one of these 392s, super fun to drive on road, super great off-road, smooth, all of that. And no matter how low they make the gearing on the V6, this is a V8. Let me know your thoughts.